My name is Selin Balci, and my work is about BioArt. So I'm using biological mediums in my work. Mostly they are like mold spores, sometimes bacteria, and then these mold spores are taken from air, from the outside, from soil, from tree barks, and sometimes from humans actually. So I'm just swabbing little samples from human skin, and then I'm just growing them on canvases. BioArt started maybe 15-20 years ago, and we are just using biological mediums, like the stuff that you use basically in your work. It should be living material. This could be like a plant that you can use in your work. It could be like living organisms, like microorganisms and so on. But whatever you are using, it needs to be alive and it needs to just create the work. So there should be like a process when you are creating your work basically. So what I do is I'm just going out and then just walk in a forest or in a park, and then I'm collecting a couple of samples like tree barks and leaves and little soil samples from my path, and then I'm just bringing all of those samples to my studio, and then there's a certain way of isolating those microorganisms living in those material actually. So then I isolate them and I create my color palette. I don't have too many colors, so it's like 7 or 8 colors. Every season it changes. Sometimes I just isolate from the air too, so penicillium is like what is just growing from the air. So it's like green, yellow, white, purple sometimes, a little bit pinkish, red. That's the most of the colors. I have a microbiology background, so this is like how I ended up actually with this practice. So I worked as a plant pathologist in research labs for about 6 years or so. So this is my first training. So I first graduated from forestry when I was living in Istanbul. And then I came to United States, and then I started to just study intermedia and photography at the West Virginia University. And then I moved to College Park, Maryland. And when I was doing my master's in the fine arts, I started to use the biological mediums. And then, so it's basically like what I knew before as a plant pathologist, it became like my art medium actually in my work. There's one concept that I'm always coming back in the work. What happens is actually, so I'm just taking them from the nature, putting them into this artificial environment, which is the petri dish or like a panel. The size is limited, the food is very limited, everything is very limited actually in that little 12 by 12 panel. So what happens is, when these guys are just growing and then just giving the colors or the forms into this panel, conflicts occur. They're trying to survive in that environment. So the food is restricted, they have to fight for it. The space is restricted, they have to fight for it. It's almost like they're behaving like humans, but they don't have their brain actually. They just do this with instinctively. So they don't just think about it. But as we are humans, we are just absolutely doing the same thing actually in our world. I'm from Turkey, so that region, the East region, is always in conflicts, wars are happening. That kind of conflict is kind of happening actually in the work. They're just representing human condition, human behavior in a smaller scale. I've been here in Annapolis for about 12 years or so now. I knew the Maryland Hall, but I was just using my home studio as my studio space. I started to get these museum invitations for exhibitions and so on, and then I said I need a bigger space to just create the installations. It came very suddenly that there was an opening actually for the studio, and I applied, and then I just got my studio 2 years ago. Here actually in this studio I did 2 big installations. The first one was this year actually ended up I just put the work up at the Staten Island Museum, and then the second one is coming up at the Baltimore Museum of Art at the end of this month. So I created big scale work actually in the studio, and then I love our high ceiling and nice light coming through my windows, and then coming here every day, it was really nice. I was able to just meet with the community, so all of the other artists, all of the classes that are all the teaching artists are teaching here. So I start to just talk to them and then learn from them, and also I start to just show or like teach what BioArt is to the community. This art form is not known actually very well. I mean, even in like Maryland or in New York, like, you know, if you just, you know, think a little bit bigger, like it's not that much known. There are not too many people, too many artists, you know, using the living organisms actually in their work. So that was a good opportunity to show like what I do, and then just introduce what BioArt is. So the Baltimore Museum of Art exhibition is part of the Baker Award award basically. So I got that award in 2019 in the interdisciplinary area. Like every year actually the Baker Award is like awarding artists, so they pick like 5 artists in each category, and then one artist is just winning the biggest award at the end. But all of the visual artists and then the interdisciplinary artists are just exhibiting their work at the Baltimore Museum of Art. So this is the year that I am exhibiting over there. So the work I'm putting over there, it is going to be a big installation with 85 different size panels. And the most important part of that installation is all of the mold spores that employed in that work, they're all taken from the park, the Wyman Park, right next to the Baltimore Museum of Art. You know, like we're not able to see these microorganisms with the naked eye. I'm just making them visible. I'm making like the invisible visible to our eyes. So it will be making that Wyman Park mold spores living in the soil, living in the trees over there, and then it will be inside of the museum, and then it will be covering the whole wall, and it will make it like alive over there. From 120 people. And then I took their portraits with Polaroid camera, and then there's a technique that you lift the Polaroid images, and then I put it into little panels, and then after that I isolated the mold spores from those participants, swap their faces or like they touch with their fingers and so on to the growth medium in the petri dishes, and then after that I applied those mold spores into their faces, and then that created some kind of a different identity of those people, because like we have mold spores like everywhere in our skin, on the air, on this table, like they're like everywhere living, but we're not just able to see them. So by just making them visible, so it is like almost like, you know, questioning our connection to the nature. The opening is on April 26th. So I'm always like, you know, researching and then just, you know, finding the best things for me to just, you know, use on the later projects, because I have done like 2 big exhibitions in 1 year. So that was really a lot. I was like working like non-stop since, you know, last year. So now I'm just gonna stop and then just, you know, again like go back to the materials and equipment that I'm using, and I'm just gonna explore new techniques.